Alright, today we are putting the Canon EOS R up against the Canon EOS RP, and I know that this is definitely a popular topic because people are usually looking for a good value camera, and you know, a lot of people can't really afford the Canon R5, and even the R6 is kind of out of the reach of a lot of photographers and videographers. So you know, people starting out with content creation, whether it's photography or video, they really want to know, you know, is the Canon EOS R that much better than the RP, or would you be better off starting with the RP and investing in glass? So today we will get into the pros of each camera and which one I think you should go for. Okay, let's start with pros of the Canon EOS RP. Obviously, the first big one is going to be price. So this is one of the cheapest full-frame mirrorless cameras that you can get on the market today. And honestly, I think this is a great value for a very specific set of people. So you can buy this camera new for $1,300. I've seen it on Facebook Marketplace for around $750 to $800. So used, you can definitely find a good price, but you'll definitely have to make sure that the shutter count is relatively low compared to the average shutter life of the RP, which I'll get into in a little bit. Honestly though, if I were to acquire this camera again, I'd probably look for it used instead of new, just because, you know, $750 or $800 versus $1,300 is a pretty big difference. Another great thing about this camera is you're not really sacrificing too much in terms of autofocus capabilities, so you're still going to get that really accurate eye autofocus, which means that you're going to have an easy time taking portraiture with your fast prime lenses. So if you don't have a mirrorless camera yet and you do have a ton of EF glass, just buy an adapter with the Canon EOS RP and you'll definitely be happy with the autofocus. You'll be able to use those fast primes for portraiture and you know, use them at the maximum aperture and still get really accurate autofocus, which is awesome. So personally, I think that the biggest selling point for the Canon EOS RP is that you can get really good video capabilities at a really good value. So that means if you want to start a YouTube channel, or if you want to, you know, just start vlogging, or you know, just doing video work on the side, this is a great camera to start out with, just because the autofocus works great when you're shooting 1080p. And I would say that while the autofocus speed wasn't as good as my Canon EOS R, the autofocus accuracy and acquisition was just as good. So for me, it was definitely reliable for video work, and that was the first camera that I used to start my YouTube channel. Also, if you're just looking for a video camera to document time with your friends or family, the RP is a really great choice for that. Another big reason that you might want to go with the Canon EOS RP is the size of the camera. So, you know, there is a pretty significant weight difference and size difference between the RP and the Canon EOS R. And, you know, paired with some of the RF glass, I personally would rather have the Canon EOS R. For example, if you pair the RF 85mm 1.2 lens with the RP, it's just not a great balance there. But that being said, if you have smaller RF lenses like 35 or even the 85 f2, then I think that the Canon EOS RP paired with those lenses could be a pretty compact setup. And if that's what you're looking for, then the RP is a great choice. So I think that those are the biggest upsides to the Canon EOS RP. Let's get into the pros of the Canon EOS R and why you might want to buy that camera over the RP. But before we do that, just a reminder, I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers by March 1st. So if you like this content, definitely help me out by subscribing and liking this video. Okay, let's take a look at the Canon EOS R. Even though I did acquire the Canon EOS R6, this camera is definitely still one of my favorite cameras, and I just love the build and the weight of the camera, especially paired with these RF lenses. So that is one of the reasons why you might want to acquire the Canon EOS R over the RP, is that the general build quality of the camera is better than the RP, which is to be expected, just because there's a pretty big difference in the price point. With the Canon EOS R, you're going to get better weather sealing, and you can definitely tell that there is not as much plastic utilized in the camera build as the RP. That's not to say that the RP doesn't have a nice build. I do like the feel of that camera, but you can definitely tell it's cheaper and it won't last as long. Which brings me to the shutter life, which is the RP only has a average shutter life of 100,000 shutter actuations. Now that's definitely really low, and personally I've never shot on a camera that only has a shutter life of 100,000. If we're talking about the Canon EOS R, this has a average shutter life of 200,000 shutter actuations, which is a little bit more standard. Now when we look at more modern cameras like the R6, that has 300,000, and then the R5 is, I believe that's rated for 500,000 shutter actuations, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, so that's definitely one thing to take into consideration, is that if you're taking a lot of photos with the camera, the RP just might not last as long. So I used to have two Canon EOS RP cameras, and initially I thought that those were going to be able to kind of last me a while, and I was going to be able to get by with those cameras. But what I found was that I was really limited by the video capabilities of that camera. So the EOS RP is a good camera for, you know, HD video. So if you're shooting in 1080p, you can still get that dual pixel autofocus, and the image quality is decent. But with the Canon EOS R, you can shoot in 4K and still get that dual pixel autofocus, which is great. Now there is a crop, but again, if you have the right lenses to kind of counter that crop, like if you have a wide lens, like I have the 15 to 35 RF lens, which kind of makes it somewhat of a non-issue for me. And in the Canon EOS R, you do get access to higher frame rates, like 1080p in 60 frames per second, and also if you go down to 720p, you can get 120 frames per second and still get decent quality. And those video capabilities are just not existent in the Canon EOS RP. If you're a photographer and you're deciding between the RP and the R, I would probably suggest that you just go with the Canon EOS R. And again, try to find it for a good used price. If you're going to get the R, I wouldn't buy it new, but if you can find it used, it's going to be really, really good value. And one of the reasons that I think that you should choose the R over the RP for photography is that one, the frames per second that you can shoot in is a little bit faster, so it's not a big difference. It's 5 frames per second with the R if you are in continuous autofocus, and it's only 4 frames per second with the RP in continuous autofocus. So both relatively slow for today's standards, but personally I'm good with 5 frames per second. And I kind of prefer it, even if I'm shooting with my Canon EOS R6, I usually put it into continuous low just because I don't want to be firing off 12 frames per second and have to kind of call through all of that during the editing process. So I would say 5 it's good. Another thing that photographers are really going to appreciate is the better sensor. So I'm not necessarily talking about the megapixels here. It's nice to have the 30 megapixels in the Canon EOS R, but what is better and more practical for me, and something that I hated about the RP, was that the dynamic range, there's a big difference between the two sensors. So you really can't do much with the RP raw files without it falling apart and becoming really noisy and losing your color. But you can push the Canon EOS R sensor more than the RP. So I kind of felt like when I was shooting the raw photos with the Canon EOS RP, I was basically just editing a JPEG. So definitely keep that in mind. The dynamic range is way better in the Canon EOS R. All right, 2 more things and then I will finish this video up. In the Canon EOS R, you're gonna get better battery life, which is a big plus for me. The EOS R uses a bigger battery than the RP, so you know, if that's a big deal to you, then definitely go with the R. And the last thing, and personally I think is the biggest deciding factor, is that the Canon EOS R has a mechanical shutter. So if you haven't already, definitely check out my Canon EOS RP videos, check out the review, and then check out my videos on how to get around the EFCS limitations of that camera. And what I'm talking about is that the Canon EOS RP does not have a mechanical shutter in it. So you're stuck with either the electronic front curtain shutter or a fully electronic shutter. Now the Canon EOS R does have a mechanical shutter, which is really important if you're utilizing fast glass at high shutter speeds. I won't go into it in depth, but if you are using wide apertures with the RP at faster shutter speeds, you'll start to get those negative effects that you get with electronic front curtain shutters, where you'll start to see clipping in the out of focus areas, and I'll try to put an example of that up in this video. So, but definitely check out those videos. I think it's pretty important for people to know the negative effects that you're going to get with the electronic front curtain shutter, especially if you're going to purchase the Canon EOS RP. All right, so that is it for today. I hope you guys were able to learn something new and something of value that you can use to make a more informed decision for your purchase. If you did learn something new, or if you have any questions about any comments that I made in this video, then definitely leave a comment below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And again, trying to reach 500 subscribers by March 1st. So if you like this content, subscribe. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.